What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy, Faithful to God, and I am joined by my friend Abu. Say hello to the audience, Abu.
Good afternoon. If everyone can hear me, I'm calling in from New York.
And today we are going to be discussing the history of language claims at First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. And we are going to be showing how, of all the languages that have been proposed thus far, it seems that Arabic has the strongest case if language is indeed on the pews. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my friend Abu. And Abu, I've kind of given people a kind of brief, introduction. If you could just maybe expand upon it a little bit and let people know more or less, why the subject is important and also, why the case for Arabic thus far seems to be the strongest.
Okay, so it's important for a couple of different reasons. First off, just on a historical note, totally separate from internet polemics and internet discussions and stuff like that. If there's writing on the pews, and if that writing was made by slaves in the Americas, that's significant, and it would be worth investigating that to see what it says, even if it turns out to be Portuguese or English or something like that. Whatever it is, if there's writing there that would have historical value, because it's a piece of American history. So that's one reason why it's important. Separate from that, within the realm of dialogue with Hebrew Israelites, there are these sort of rising and falling claims about Hebrew on the pews. Sometimes they pop up, then they disappear. People don't want to discuss it anymore. Then it pops up again. And, since it pops up, I've taken the time to investigate these claims and try to do so as fairly as possible. And as Faithful just noted, we're going to take a look at some of the different claims for different languages, because right now the website of First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, says that it's the pews have Hebrew, Aramaic, Ge'ez, and Amharic, among other languages. It used to say Arabic, but it removed the claim of Arabic.
Right. Well, without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation. So we are going to begin with the first slide, and it's going to discuss the timeline of language claims. So let's actually examine the earliest claims, and perhaps we can see if there was any sort of evolution in thought at the church at any point in time. So we'll begin with this chart right here, and the chart begins with about the 1970s, right? So this is the timeline of claims. So what are our earliest claims? Well, some people might assert, who are favorable to the view of Hebrew, that Hebrew was the oldest language claim, but in fact, it was not the oldest claim. If we can look in the 1970s, the first claim was African scribble scrabble. And so we have,
So I list those. So those sources are listed under each claim, and I don't have documentation for this from the 70s, but the historian Amir Muhammad recounted that he had been to First African Baptist Church in the 70s, and he recounted that in an interview with Will Brown.
Right. And so, and Will Brown being a proponent of Hebrew being on the pews. So interesting that Amir Muhammad's first recollection was for African scribble scrabble rather than anything Hebrew or even Arabic or whatever.
And if I could just note something, the reason why we put scribble scrabble in quotation marks is it's not us saying that, because that is a little, some might find that disrespectful. That's an exact quote of what he said. He said that he recalled them at the church saying it's African scribble scrabble. Right. That's the phrase that he recalled them using. We're not calling it scribble scrabble.
Of course. And we'll have a video in the description. So for all of these things that we're showing, anything that we don't cover exhaustively, we'll have a video in the description covering the relevant subject. So the second claim is for African tribal markings. And so you give the reference here. Here, I'll
it's Gwendolyn McKee and Casey, was it Rattery? They have a book titled Savannah, Where to Go and What to Do. And that's from the early 90s. And they reference that.
And so here, let me actually do something, because I know some
go
people
full screen. I guess they don't need to see our icons, but yeah.
Yep, there it is. So we have African scribble scrabble proposed by Amir Muhammad, then Gwendolyn McKee's African tribal markings. So this is from 94. So we're talking about a claim from the 90s. So showing that this was, and we'll have the links to everything in the description for everybody to read for themselves. So the first time that Hebrew was proposed at any point,
as far as what we can find in terms of recordings,
well, as far as what we can find exactly, was 2008, and it was in Nigel Richardson's Black and White Tales of Two Cities from the Daily Telegraph from August the 30th, 2008, page 12.
And that was a particularly interesting article because the article states that for a long time people were uncertain what were on the markings, what were in those markings, what they were. And then the author says, while it was a puzzle for a long time, now some believe that it could be cursive Hebrew. So it's like he's capturing, the article is capturing when people started transitioning to the possibility that it was Hebrew.
Right.
And so, me personally, I don't think the claim of, you'll meet people who say, oh, the church always believed there was Hebrew. There's a number of people who say that. But as far as what I can see in terms of documentation, it doesn't seem like the claim existed before the first decade of the 2000s, but the so
Indeed.
called noughties, as they say.
Indeed. And so Arabic was proposed in 2015 by a tweet and Instagram post by someone named Mr. Vanak.
Vina. So I just want
Vina.
to be clear. This is again as far as what we can document. So I would guess that the Arabic claim may have predated that, but in terms of something that can be documented, like that's the earliest reference to Arabic that I've found in writing. It was a tweet from 2015, and we'll link to
Indeed.
it in the video description.
Indeed. And after that, we have, if you can pronounce this,
Adinkra. Brandy Collins, it's available on C-SPAN, and again, we'll link to this as well. Brandy Collins, in a lecture at Georgetown Law in 2016, had proposed that the markings might be Adinkra, which is a series
right,
of markings that are used in, I think, Ghana, and in other parts of West Africa, perhaps.
right. And for the record, just if we could point out, and we'll mention this a little bit more as the stream goes on, uh, a lot of the language claims early on were arrived to by perhaps the mere resemblance of specific markings looking
Yeah,
like quote unquote letters.
yeah.
So this is how it was initially prior to about 2019. This is the way that it seems that most people were arriving at these claims.
Mhm.
So in 2018, Ge'ez, and so here's an example of such a claim that was proposed by
Yes.
Ephraim Isaac, where he saw the resemblance of characters that, keeping in mind what looked like markings that resembled mere letters, right? So
Yes, yeah. So Efrem Isaac, he's a scholar of Ge'ez, scholar of Semitic languages, but his main focus is Ge'ez and Amharic at Princeton University. He was brought there to the church by Alvin Elmore, who made that documentary Cryptic Quest, and he had proposed Ge'ez characters, and so that was filmed in 2018.
correct. And then we have, interestingly enough, Aramaic, which was alluded to by Kelly Richardson, um, based on what he perceived to be resemblance to
Well,
letters.
no, to be clear here, so I put there,
Okay.
it says alluded to by Kelly Richardson as having been proposed by others.
Oh, proposed by
So
others.
Kelly Richardson now affirms Aramaic, but in 2018 he was saying, and this is on his first video on the As Gods Movement channel, he was saying that others, that the agenda is trying to reclassify it as Aramaic, and he seemed more hostile to it back then. He was saying,
Right.
the agenda is proposing Aramaic, but it's, he was saying that it's not at the time. But the point is that we have this sort of documentation from 2018 of Kelly disagreeing with certain unnamed people who were saying
That's what it
Aramaic.
was. That's
Yeah.
what it was. So so my apologies.
So
Yes.
clearly the claim of Aramaic at least existed as far back as 2018 because
So
Kelly Richardson's on record for saying that.
he was giving pushback to the idea, but he was saying others had proposed the idea. I
Hmm.
see. Okay. So in 2019, Benaiah Israel proposed Ladino as being on the pews.
Yes.
In 2020, Insipidity was proposed by Kelly Richardson. In 2021, Amharic was proposed or by a secret scholar that was invoked by Kelly Richardson.
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
see some of these secret
Yeah,
scholars in
we'll
a
discuss that a little bit in
yeah
this video, and then
yeah
we have another discussion planned for the coming days, maybe a week from now, but maybe just a few days, which will get into some of the controversies
right
with these secret scholars beyond the Katz fiasco.
yeah. And then in 2021, English was proposed by a secret scholar by the name of Shaul, who was invoked by
Yes,
Kelly.
the mysterious Shaul, who, based on what Kelly Richardson said, he seemed to insinuate that this was Shaul Shakid over at the Hebrew University in
Right,
Jerusalem, but he didn't say that himself. But
right,
that's the implication. Someone named Shaul had proposed that it was English in in Hebrew characters.
right. So that is the proposal for language claims. So we are going to move to the second section, which is proposals for language claims. Now we're going to show what has actually been proposed. Now, for the record, if we could just go back momentarily, although it doesn't appear here, the first and so let's
So, yeah,
actually
if I could say this,
yeah
so those claims that you just had on the list, these claims were being made often without anyone actually trying to point something out. So someone might say Hebrew or Aramaic or Adinkra, but they wouldn't actually point to what was there. So what in the second section, if I'm not mistaken, you're going to show a video which
Right.
quickly in 8 minutes sums
Although
up
to
the
be fair,
actual.
to be fair, some would point to resemblance to letters, but there was
Yes,
no
yes,
pointing. Let's be clear on this. That not that nobody pointed to anything and didn't propose something
yes, correct.
on the basis of letters.
Mm.
Uh, but the proposals were generally relegated to that. This
Yeah.
looks
So
like X letter from this language,
yes,
therefore
that
X
definitely
language.
existed. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely for Hebrew and Ge'ez and Arabic. There, yeah, people were saying resemblances to markings. If I'm not mistaken, you're going to show a video that's going to cut through
Yes.
some of the examples of proposals of words and proposals of even
Right.
phrases. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And so I did want to point that out because I don't want anybody who takes any sort of viewpoint to accuse us of somehow being disingenuous. Not that you were, but sometimes we can misspeak. The thing is that and we'll mention this later. Language requires coherent words and phrases, right? It's not just the idea of mere resemblance to letters, or markings that resemble letters. Language requires words and phrases being present. If I simply say this looks like this letter, it's very much the case that it could be a false positive because it could look like another letter from a completely different language rather than the one that I'm proposing. So that's why, in terms of methodology, it's important that we show coherent words and phrases rather than just mere resemblance to characters or letters. So I'm going to go ahead and show. Oops. Let me go to this section right here. Here we go. And so we will actually play the video that you are seeing on your screen in a moment. Here we go.
For this pew, there have been 3 different proposed readings so far. Benaiah Israel proposed that it's Hebrew in the Solitreo script, or what's known as the Sephardi cursive script. But he bizarrely proposed that Hebrew is running backwards from left to right. He proposed a barely coherent string of characters, which he claimed roughly approximated something along the lines of take grasp of Yah with a bass voice. Amazingly, his documentary Reclaiming the Throne has a claim that his interpretation was confirmed by scholars. Which scholars? Doesn't say. Whatever the case, I highlighted a specific portion in yellow because that part has been interpreted in a few different ways by different individuals. Note that here, the portion marked in yellow was interpreted by Benaiah as being 2 chets in the Solitreo script. To show other interpretations of those same markings, let's rotate this pew 180 degrees. From this vantage point, the scholar David Bunis from Hebrew University of Jerusalem tentatively proposed that it might read Yisrael or Israel. And it reads that way, he proposed, in the standard Ashuri script, which is to say the block script or the square script, what's now the standard Hebrew script. He later clarified that he based his hesitant proposal on the markings resembling 2 characters, the shin and lamed, with the rest being unclear, at which point his lighthearted suggestion merely filled in the gaps. However, he also clarified that he couldn't even see those 2 characters without Benaiah's highlights, as Will Brown sent Bunis this image with highlights from Benaiah Israel. It was within that highlighting that Bunis saw a resemblance to 2 characters. Nonetheless, it's worth noting that the precise markings that Benaiah interpreted as 2 Solitreo chets was interpreted by Bunis as a single Ashuri shin. And aside from that, the scholar Ephraim Isaac from Princeton University discussed this same pew from this same vantage point in the 2018 documentary Cryptic Quest. Isaac looked at the same markings and saw 2 Ge'ez characters, Ha and Shah, in precisely the place where Benaiah saw 2 Solitreo chets and Bunis saw a resemblance to an Ashuri shin. So 3 different people came up with 3 different interpretations of the same portion, proposing different characters, even different numbers of characters, in 3 different scripts. Benaiah, for his part, treated his interpretation as obvious and went so far as to insinuate that those who disagree might be engaging in gaslighting.
Right. And for me, I mean, there were some letters that were just obvious. Like, I mean, I'm not to throw shade, but that you don't have a doctor's degree to know that that letter that goes like that is right there. You know what I mean? It's like simple stuff, right? And then they come up, oh, that's not that letter. Oh no, that's not the, in stuff like that. I do the SMH for that, but we put it out there so people can look at the letters, compare to look at the pews and see if they can see the letters. And for a lot of that stuff, it is very obvious, right?
This pew has been the most discussed of all the pews and has 4 or 5 different proposed readings for it. Kelly Richardson proposed that it's Hebrew in the Solitreo script, and he proposed that it reads Yisrael Yom, or Israel Day. However, he proposed that Israel, or Yisrael, was spelled in a completely unique and ahistorical way, with 5 yods and a zayin, but no sin or aleph. And Yom, he proposed, was written with a regular mem rather than a final mem, which is to say a mem sofi. Kelly also shared an email from a man he called Shaul, whom he claimed was a scholar at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. While Kelly never gave this mysterious Shaul's last name, his description of the man seems to imply that he was referring to Shaul Shakit. Amazingly, the email from this mysterious Shaul declared emphatically that the markings were not Hebrew, but it also shared the tentative suggestion that there's a remote possibility that it could be English in the now standard Hebrew cursive script, what's called by some the Ashkenazi cursive. And it proposed that the string of characters could be Lamed Resh Yod Yod Tet. Aside from that, the Orthodox Moor sent this pew to the scholar Brian Kirshen, who's at Binghamton University. Kirshen said he felt the markings overall vaguely resembled Arabic, but if he were to try to wrench a Solitreo reading from it, he would suggest as a possibility Aleph Resh Yod Yod Lamed, which he said would be the name Ariel, more specifically a non-standard spelling of Ariel, with only 2 yods in the center rather than Yod Aleph as per the standard spelling. And aside from those readings, there are the scholars who proposed an Arabic reading for this pew. 3 different scholars proposed an Arabic reading for this pew, and in fact, they proposed the same Arabic reading for this pew. Jafri Khan, the Hebrew chair at Cambridge, along with Samar Ali from the University of Michigan and Mahan Mirza from Notre Dame, all proposed independently of each other that the Quranic Arabic phrase Ilahi Nas might appear here, this being a verse from the last chapter of the Quran. Jafri Khan was emphatic that the markings are Arabic and not Hebrew. Samar Ali and Mahan Mirza were more tentative in their suggested proposals, but nonetheless, all 3 proposed Ilahi Nas for this particular pew. Beyond that, Jafri Khan and Samar Ali gave a more expansive reading, proposing that the markings on the right read in Arabic An-Nas, so altogether An-Nas Ilahi Nas, which would mean humanity, the God of humanity. Of all these readings for this pew, the Arabic proposals, whether it be the shorter proposal or the more expansive proposal, the Arabic proposals are the only ones to have historical precedent, not only in Arabic literature in general, but more specifically in Arabic written by slaves in the United States. This pew has had 1 proposal for it. The Harvard linguist Boubacar Diakite had proposed that the Arabic phrase La ilaha illallah appeared on a pew. Aside from him, a former tour guide at First African Baptist Church, Emil Jamal Touré, proposed the same reading. It seems that they both had in mind this pew, which does look like it has La ilaha illallah sloppily written on it. But this pew is also thought-provoking because it invites a more expansive view of the pews, in which one tries to interpret multiple pews simultaneously in light of their proximity to each other. To explain what I mean, we're going to pull back from this pew and look at it together with the pew next to it. Now, as you look at these 2 pews together, note that Boubacar Diakite had not only proposed La ilaha illallah for a pew, he also proposed that Muhammad Rasulullah appeared on the pews. As was just noted, a resemblance to La ilaha illallah appears right here on the lower part of the pew on the left. But where might we find the phrase Muhammad Rasulullah? While I have not found a pew with the word Muhammad, there is a curious resemblance to something approximating the words Rasul and Allah across these 2 pews. Look at these markings at the top of these 2 pews. The top of the pew on the left looks like it has Ra and Sin, the first 2 letters of the Arabic word Rasul, almost as if someone wrote La ilaha illallah on this pew and then tried to write Rasul, but ran out of space. And the pew on the right has at its top a coincidental resemblance to the word Allah. If that's merely a coincidence, it's an incredible coincidence. But to make this a bit more clear, let's swing back to our close-up of that pew on the left. As was already noted, most of it resembles a sloppily written Arabic phrase, La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. Now let's add the top of the adjacent pew underneath the unhighlighted portion of this pew. In this juxtaposition on the right, the top portion looks like Ra, Sin, the first 2 words of Rasul, and the bottom portion looks like the word Allah. It really does look like someone sloppily wrote La ilaha illallah on this pew and then tried to write Rasulullah across multiple pews, but might have run out of space when writing Rasul. As I said, this is an incredible coincidence. And perhaps it's worth noting that these phrases too, La ilaha illallah and Rasulullah, are also found in extant examples of Arabic written by slaves in the United States.
All right, excellent. So
There we go.
Yep.
So real quick, before I forget, and we're going to go to the next section, which is relevant to how this video ends. I did want to point out that, and I forgot to mention this earlier, at least expand upon it. The first person to actually present a proposal similar to what you're seeing on your screen in the form of a thought experiment at that was you in
Yes.
2018. Prior to you, no one had actually looked at one of these pews and tried to recreate a reading based on, at least overtly or publicly.
Mhm.
No one attempted to do this. And the people that were trying to invoke Hebrew being on the pews were simply pointing at the resemblance of letters, or invoking other languages, were generally looking at markings that resembled particular letters, and that
Yeah.
seemed to be the case. And it wasn't until 2019 with your video, which I'll provide in the description of this video, that a reading, a coherent word or phrase reading was proposed for Arabic. And of course, you've had people who have pushed back against the idea of Arabic on the basis of certain letters not looking like perfect Arabic, or whatever the case is, grammatically good Arabic, quote unquote good Arabic. But here we're going to look at example of slaves in the Americas who wrote in Arabic in a form of Arabic that would be considered quote unquote sloppy, if one were to take the view of, finding Arabic necessitates that Arabic be written in a specific way. Well, here's an example of slaves writing in Arabic, which itself could be considered a form of so-called sloppy Arabic. Right?
Yes. So, for example, what you have on the screen here was produced by. It says it there in the fine print. It was written by a Mandingo slave in Haiti. And one of the things that stands out is there's a number of spelling errors, right? So, for example, in the what's called the basmala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, there's a number of spelling errors almost in every word. So, for example, the word Allah, he spells it with only one lam when it's supposed to be spelled with two. In the definite articles of both ar-Rahman and ar-Rahim, he omitted the alif in the definite article in both. So you have three words in a row that are misspelled. Then the next two instances, which are roughly in the middle of the word Allah, again, he spells it with only one lam. And then separate from the spelling errors, there's also a spelling error towards the end, a couple of spelling errors towards the end. Another thing that's really interesting here is towards the end. So the last verse, this is actually the 112th chapter of the Quran that he was attempting to reproduce here from memory. The last verse of that chapter it reads lam yakun lahu. Oh, sorry, if you could go back. Yeah. So yeah, let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, perfect. So if you'll notice right in the center now, there's a very long line that arches over. That's the beginning of the last verse of this chapter, the 112th chapter of the Quran, right? And it reads lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, right? And here's what's interesting to me is, so there's some spelling errors there in terms of like yakun and also kufuan. But nonetheless, what's interesting to me is that in the first word, lam, where that really long line is, he wrote the lam, the letter lam, very, very large. And then 2 words later, you have lahu, which literally means to him. He writes the same letter very, very small. And so you see within the same sentence, the same letter is getting written in drastically different ways. And this is significant because for the proposal that the phrase ilahi nas appears on a pew, the Arabic phrase ilahi nas, which 3 different scholars proposed independently of each other, in order for that to work, that would also require that the alifs and lams are being written in drastically different lengths and drastically different styles.
Right.
So one of the knocks against the Arabic reading for the pew actually has historical precedent in Arabic produced by slaves in the Americas.
Exactly. And let's actually look at some other examples. So this is from an anonymous slave who was unfortunately owned by a man named David Anderson.
Yes, in
and
South
so-
Carolina in the
South Carolina.
18th century. Yeah.
So could you actually explain to people the relevancy of this?
Okay, so the text that's highlighted there is the 114th or last chapter of the Quran, and it contains text that has been proposed for the pews of, in Savannah. So this is Surat An-Nas, the 114th chapter of the Quran, and it appears in the writing of a slave in South Carolina. If you could go to the next slide, this is where we're going to zoom in on this precisely right here. So what's highlighted there reads Anas ilahi nas, right? That exact phrase, letter for letter, has been proposed by two different scholars independently of each other for one of the pews, that being Jafri Khan and Samar Ali. They both
Right.
proposed independently of each other this exact string of characters, Anas ilahi nas, for the pew that we had looked at, that second pew.
Right.
And this is significant because this is a long string of characters, a very complex string of characters. And the string of characters that was proposed for one of the pews has precedent, not only in Arabic literature, but literally in the Arabic of slaves written by slaves in the southern United States.
Correct.
So the very thing that's proposed for the pews by two different scholars is also found in the writings of other slaves in the southern United States. This was in
Indeed.
South Carolina, if I recall correctly. Or no, this
Indeed.
was South Carolina. This is from South Carolina. Yeah.
All right. So, and here goes. So we can.
This was just a reproduction of what was there. Yeah, it's just so people can see what exactly was written there, and I put in red what's missing. So this is from the Bilali document, the Bilali diary. So there was a man in Georgia. So now we're not even saying the southern United States, more specifically Georgia. Remember that First African Baptist Church is in Georgia. So at Sapelo Island, which is not too far from Savannah, there was a gentleman who wrote in Arabic. He was known as Bilali, and he left a diary. And what's interesting is Boubacar Diakite and Amir Jamal Torre both proposed that La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, appeared on one of the pews. And that phrase as well also appears in the writings of a slave in the Americas, but more specifically, a slave in Georgia. So this is a second instance of an Arabic phrase proposed by a scholar for a pew, also being found elsewhere in the writings of a slave in the southern United States. In this case, more specifically, Georgia.
Correct. Real quick, I'd like to do something before we go to the next slide.
Can I say one thing? So while it's not exactly the same, that also the Bilali thing, if you could. Well, we'll get back to it later.
Real quick. I just wanted to point out something briefly because
sure, no problem.
I wanted to point out that some of the proposals on these pews is really, and I'm saying for Hebrew, for example, have been determined based on the way that the pew has been looked at. So if you look at it from this angle, if I'm not mistaken, this was Benaya's proposal. Yes. But then when you turn the same pew right side up, this is the proposal, right? That somebody saw certain letters, although the rest was clearly not clear.
Different letters and different scripts. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, another pew. This was the initial proposal that you made in your thought experiment that then certain other scholars also endorsed, and then they additionally added this phrase at the end, right? And interestingly enough, this is the same pew looked at by Kirshen, Brian Kirshen, where he didn't think it didn't look to him immediately as anything other than maybe resemblance to Arabic. But then if he were to wrestle something out of it, tentatively, hesitantly, this is what he wrestled.
If he was going to insist on solitreo, this is what he would, he tentatively suggested as a possibility.
Which we'll see in a moment when we start looking at the scholars. And this was Kelly Richardson's proposal on the same pew. Notice that most of the pew, this is a ahistorical spelling of whatever.
This can't be found anywhere. So not only can it not be found in the writings of slaves, it can't be found in any piece of writing anywhere. It's completely ahistorical. And yet the Arabic proposals not only are among the most well-attested Arabic phrases in the history of writing, they're even found. Here we go. Exactly. Let's read through this if you could. Or you want me to do it? I'll do it. For the two Arabic phrases which were proposed for the pews, right? Those Arabic phrases have also been found in the writings of slaves living in the southern United States. And I want to add to this, they're also among the most well-attested pieces of writing in human history. So these phrases, La ilaha illallah and An-nas ilahi nas, as part of a larger text, have been written by many millions of people over the centuries. As for Kelly, meanwhile, the barely coherent string of characters proposed by Kelly Richardson is not found in any writing produced by slaves in the Americas, nor is it found in any writing beyond slavery in the United States. It's not found anywhere. It's completely ahistorical. So this is important because some of the proponents of Hebrew on the pews, like Benaiah Israel and others, have said, oh, well, don't just look at the markings, also think about the historical context. Well, if we're looking at the historical context, the Arabic phrases win out on historical context because they're found in lots of Arabic writing, including the writing of Arabic by slaves in the Americas, which cannot be said about the Hebrew proposed by Kelly or the Hebrew proposed by Benaiah.
Indeed. All right. So now we're going to segue to the next section, section 3, examining emails from scholars and what is required regarding language claims. So again, we've mentioned it earlier, but just regarding what's necessary for language claims, could you just very briefly give a overview. What is necessary? What is
Well,
required?
clearly different people have different standards. I've always argued since I got into this, which is like 2016, and then I made my first video in 2019. I've been arguing that for language claims, people should be producing strings of characters complex enough to give rise to words and phrases. Even words, if it's a short word, it sort of breaks down because you can get coincidences even with that. But preferably phrases, sentences. So strings of characters strong enough to produce phrases and sentences. And Will Brown even acknowledged that that's been my challenge because he mentioned that when he unveiled Bunis. But yeah, so for some of these people, some of these other proposals, people are trying to get by just on
Right.
mere letters,
Right.
individual
All right.
characters. Yeah.
All right. So it is worth noting, thus far, no scholar we're aware of has endorsed coherent Aramaic, Ge'ez, Amharic, or Ladino words or phrases being on the pews.
Exactly. So people are claiming Ladino appears, Amharic appears, Ge'ez appears, Aramaic. Nobody has produced a single word in any of these languages.
Right. And now we're going to look at the case for Hebrew. And some scholars have proposed mild resemblance to letters and very hesitant speculative guesses to potential words. So far, no reputable scholar has definitively endorsed Hebrew as being on the pews observed.
Right. And certainly no scholar has proposed a phrase, a Hebrew phrase, or a Hebrew sentence. So you do have, like you say at the top, there are these tentative proposals for the possibility of a word, but nobody has produced, no scholar has insisted on a phrase.
Indeed. All right. And we're going to start with one of the earliest proposals, at least, and it wasn't from a scholar, it was from I believe it's a person at the church, historian,
Yes,
Karen
Wortham is
Wortham.
being quoted here. Just for anyone
Yeah.
who's interested in the source, this is a book that's titled J.B. Murray and the Scripts and Spirit Forms of Africa, and the authors are Licia Clifton-James and Maude Southwell Wahlman, and this is from page 45. But go ahead.
Yep. And what I wanted to do real quick, let me just.
And it's worth noting this is from 2022, this book, but I think
Yeah,
it
so it
dates back
says-
to a 2018 interview.
Exactly. Now it says right here, it says the inside the installed balcony seating called the slave gallery, quote unquote. The pews in the slave gallery were built by slaves and painted with signs. The present day church historian Karen Wortham states it is an agreement of the members and leadership of the church, both past and present, that this script, meaning but the pew on the script, is most likely ancient Hebrew. Brought with the slaves from the continent of Africa, they believe the script could be read as to secure a desired harvest to enter a pathway into a household. So we'll stop there. Thus far, no one at the church, including Miss Wortham herself, has been able to point to the relevant pew to say this is where this phrase appears.
Yes.
Nor has anything been proposed. No disrespect meant to her. This is not meant as any
intended, but that is an incredible claim. And it's unfortunate to have such a complex sentence being proposed, at least a translation of a sentence, yet no attempt is made to point to where that sentence can be found. Kelly Richardson claims to have images of all the pews. He's been to the church several times. He has not attempted to endorse this. He's clearly not made any attempt to endorse this sentence. And with no intended disrespect towards Miss Wortham, I definitely am. I'm confident that this does not appear on any.
We're highly skeptical of this claim, being that there's no evidence for it. Nothing has been shown or demonstrated. So let's
it
move
raises
on.
methodological questions. But go ahead.
Yeah. So this is from Richard Saracen. This was his, from his interaction with Garfield Reed, who is the host of the Garfield Reed podcast on YouTube. And this is from March 7th, 2021. And it reads, Mr. Reed, please forgive me for not getting back to you in a timely fashion. So I'll just skip ahead to the relevant section. It says, the Reverend Alvin Elmore in Chicago had introduced me to pew markings in First African Baptist Church a little over 6 years ago. And I had a chance to inspect them in person when my wife and I were in Savannah in May of 2015. There is no question in my mind that the carvings on the pews are intentional and are meant to be a kind of script. Now, this is the relevant section. They are not Hebrew, though some individual markings are similar to the formation of some Hebrew letters, meaning that they have the resemblance of letters. But he says emphatically, they are not Hebrew. And as we continue to read, there are no Hebrew words discernible there. Some of the markings bear some similarity to Arabic script. And I want you to remember that because this is going to become a reoccurring theme with some of the scholars that we're going to examine.
Especially when it comes to even scales. But go ahead.
Exactly. But here too, I can't find anything consistent, though I am not fluent in Arabic. That is salient. Still, Arabic is written entirely horizontally, and all of the letters and single words are conjoined. I did not find that consistently in the Pews either. So to be fair, he's saying he doesn't feel that Arabic is there, but he doesn't feel Hebrew is there, and he in fact goes more emphatically to say they are not Hebrew. The Pews that he looked at, and he looked at multiple Pews. All right.
And he's a professor of Hebrew. Let's keep that in mind. So
yeah.
he can speak on whether there's Hebrew there or not. It's worth noting.
So what I'm going to do right here, when he mentions right here, I think he says like the PBS documentary, This Is Our Song, on PBS streaming, which includes a brief segment on First African Baptist Church. They're one of Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s informants, unidentified, which we now know as Boubacar Diakite, indicates that the glyphs on the pews are Arabic and attests to the African Muslim heritage of some of the congregants. This is certainly likely with respect to the background and intent of those who carved these glyphs into the pews. But once again, I do not believe that there are any discernible or decipherable Arabic words there. So that is fair to point that out, because we want to be fair with what the scholars were saying. Mm-hmm. And as we look at the second section, he says,
Garfield had asked him to discuss this topic for 90 minutes. So he basically goes on to say, I couldn't have gotten into this over 90 minutes because the paragraphs above basically cover everything.
Yeah, exactly.
On this.
Yeah, so we'll just show that for the audience. So we just wanted everybody to see what the email was. So now we're going to look at David Bunis. This was a scholar of Solitero who was invoked by William Brown and Benaiah Israel. And here, obviously, for those who don't know already, who haven't been following my channel, this was a big controversy. We have a series of videos that will be in the description that exhaustively cover this issue. So for those who are interested in the David Bunis fiasco, they can see the videos in the description. And we will, in the future, have a live stream discussing this more detailed than here. Nevertheless, this is the email. This is from the 3rd of December, 2020. And Bunis is having an interaction with various people, including Will Brown himself, as you can see the will there. And it says, the name omitted. Thanks for your email. When I expressed a few hesitant words about what was written on the church pew, I had no idea that it would cause such a furor locally and maybe beyond. When I saw the inscription, I thought it might be Arabic script. You hear this? I thought it might be Arabic script. Then after seeing some interpretations by others, it seemed to me that one might be able to read the Hebrew word Yisrael, that is Israel, in it. I am far from sure about this, nor do I think what seems to be a kind of, nor do I think that what seems to be some kind of inscription on the pew is in Solitero script, or is necessarily in Hebrew at all.
So Kelly Richardson and Will Brown have a show titled Crafty Counsel for Liars or something like that. Don't need fake scholars and something like that. So really quickly, I want to mention this because that years after the Bunis controversy, Will Brown was still claiming that Bunis confirmed Solitero on the pews, which is not true. Not only in this email, but in another email, Bunis specifically told Brown that he does not think Solitero appears on the pews.
Exactly. He says, or Hebrew and all, judging from the reactions I've been receiving, my words were rather misrepresented on Will Brown's program. By the way, your microphone is Will Brown's program. Only part of our email correspondence was presented, and even that seems to have been partially misinterpreted. All right. And so we'll go to the email that he had with you, the correspondence with you. And he says, Dear Al-Mahatani or Abdel Masih, thanks for your email. I'm sorry that it took a while for me to reply. Basically, I confirm your understanding of my correspondence with William Brown. As I had written him in the beginning, the letters look more Arabic than Hebrew to me, which we confirmed by his interaction with William Brown. But I am certainly no authority in Arabic paleography. Before writing you, I spoke with someone very familiar with various Arabic and Hebrew scripts, and he was unable to read any Arabic or, frankly, Hebrew words out of the church pew inscriptions. When someone who had looked at the inscription showed us how he thought the Hebrew word for Israel, Yisrael, might be read out of it, it looked to me like it might be possibly so, although I could not see this clearly without the markings and darkenings that he, William Brown, evidently added.
Well, specifically Benaiah. Will Brown.
Benaiah. Pardon me. Benaiah. I misspoke. My part. That he added. To your questions, did you in fact reach a firm conclusion on the discernible Hebrew phrase that a discernible Hebrew phrase is on the relevant pew, or did you merely suggest possible interpretations of a collection of markings open to multiple interpretations? And did you support a reading that could be translated "take a grasp of the Lord" or Yah, etc.? If so, can you share what precise Hebrew phrase which was translated that way? My
And
reply is,
can I just say this real quick before you give his answer? The reason why I was asking this question is because, for those who don't know, similar to Karen Wortham giving a complex English sentence as a translation of a Hebrew phrase that was never shown, Will Brown did the exact same thing. He claimed that Bunis had confirmed a sentence which translates to "take grasp of Yah" or "take grasp of the Lord,"
right.
O Israel, with a bass voice, but they never showed the Hebrew sentence. So that's why I was asking him this, and this is his reply.
So his response is, my reply is no, I definitely did not reach a firm conclusion to the effect. And yes, I think that at most the markings are open to multiple interpretations. I certainly cannot make any connection between the English phrase you cited and any Hebrew expression that I can think of. So that's Bunis. Bunis didn't endorse any, at least he didn't endorse anything Hebrew or Solitero related on the pews.
Which
He
scholar
simply
is this on
gave
this
suggestions. So this is our friend Richard Katz.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah.
So this will also be in the description of the video. So this is our sock puppet friend Richard Katz, aka William Brown. If any of you would like to know what happened with that, there's a ton of videos discussing that. Basically, the synopsis is this: William Brown, the leader of Boom Church Atlanta, pretended to be a Tel Aviv-based Hebrew professor by the name of Richard Katz. We caught him with the hand in the cookie jar, and the rest is history. Most of you probably know this, but for those who don't, you can find an exhaustive overview of this in the description of the video. There will be videos in the description with each section pinpointed, and so you'll be able to find the Richard Katz fiasco or the Richard Katz debacle videos. So that's Richard Katz. He was claimed to be a Tel Aviv-based Hebrew professor and apparently didn't know much Hebrew, but anyways. And this is a secret scholar by the name of Shaul who was invoked by Kelly Richardson from We Woke Now.
Yes. So this is interesting because he initially gave us a fragment of this email, which made it seem like, and we'll discuss this in a forthcoming stream when we get into the controversies and secret scholars and fake scholars and all that. Initially, Kelly Richardson showed a fragment of this email, which made it seem like this scholar, whoever he is, he only called him Shaul, was endorsing Hebrew on the pews. Later on, we got access to the full email because I guess Kelly let his guard down. And what we saw is that it was quite the opposite. He emphatically said it's not Hebrew. But go ahead. This is someone named Shaul, a secret scholar. They have a bunch of secret scholars.
And so he showed him a bunch of basically without even the pews being involved. He showed a bunch of email. Well, he showed some emails with like some letters that resembled what he was proposing on the pews or whatever the case is. He says, I still cannot decipher the scratching on the furniture of the church with any confidence. I can only offer a single suggestion for reading the sequence of letters in the first image you sent me. It can be read hypothetically in the modern Hebrew cursive script, the script that was in use already in the medieval period, and he gives the relevant reading. And this can be rendered into English, not Hebrew text, as any of the following: to write.
Notice not Hebrew with an exclamation point, so he was emphatic.
Right. To write, all right, to write, RITE, etc. As you notice, the letters look like a sequence of signs resembling a Hebrew cursive script, but they appear to convey an English expression. I do not insist that this is the correct reading. It is at most a remote hypothesis. I cannot apply a similar guess to any of the other pieces of writings that you sent me.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So this is a scholar they themselves invoked, and he flat out told them not Hebrew. He doesn't think it's Hebrew on the pew.
Right. All right. So now this is from Brian Kirshen. This was his email correspondence with Orthodox More, and it says, "Hi, Tyvon. Thanks for your email. I received other inquiries about the same set of pews. The symbols prior and to and after the word in yellow appear more similar to the Arabic alphabet than to the Hebrew-based cursive variety, solitero. And what's interesting is this is the same pew where you presented your thought experiment, and it's the same pew that was endorsed as Hebrew by at least emphatically one scholar, Jeffrey Kahn, which we'll see a little later. So it says, based on the portion outlined in yellow, if I were to try and make something out of it, it would be the name Ariel. The letters do not exactly conform to Solitero, and the historical context certainly leaves important room for discussion and consideration as well. So he proposed something tentatively, but it wasn't him endorsing. And then this is the same Pew that was claimed to be emphatically Arabic, and not Hebrew, by Jeffrey Kahn, which we'll see a little later.
And even declared to be not Hebrew by the mysterious Shaul.
Yeah, right. And this is William L. This is our friend. Apparently, another guy, a very curious guy.
Yeah, if I could say something about this. So we don't know for a fact if this is a fake scholar, although, man, the email fragment attributed to him was quite curious. It does cause one to lean in that direction. The other possibility is that they're misrepresenting somebody, but they never showed the full email.
We're highly skeptical of that, and so
very skeptical. But
we have a video detailing that. So because we want to make sure that we move on. And
I just want to say this one thing. Yeah. This scholar, secret scholar, William L., had proposed that, or at least it seems that way from the way Kelly presents the fragment. He seems to be saying that there's a string of Ge'ez characters so complex as to be identifiable as specifically Amharic. Yet for some reason, they never showed that string of Ge'ez characters, which is highly suspicious. But go ahead.
Right. And so the video will be linked in the description if anybody's interested in this. What we believe is more than likely another fake scholar in the same vein as Richard Katz, although if it's not, then whoever this person is was clearly unfamiliar with the subjects that they were attempting to grapple with. And you'll see why if you watch the video, which will be in the description. So the next set of slides, the case for Arabic. Now we're going to the strength of the case for Arabic. Unlike Hebrew, Arabic has the strong endorsement of two reputable scholars from Cambridge and Harvard. So the Cambridge scholar is the one that we're going to be looking at momentarily, and the Harvard scholar would be Boubacar Diakite. Coherent words and phrases have been proposed. Some scholars have noted that several markings bear a resemblance to Arabic writing, as you saw with Kirshen, as you saw with the guy, as you saw with David Bounis, and as you saw Saracen. Others have shared a more hesitant or reluctant observation. All right. So Jeffrey Kahn, this is the esteemed professor of Cambridge University. In fact, the Hebrew chair. So he's the top Hebrew professor at the university. And this was his correspondence with you in December 14th of 2020. And it reads, Dear Abdel, thank you very much for your message and for the photos of the pews in Savannah. The writing is Arabic. So he says it emphatically. The writing, oops, I skipped ahead. Oops, pardon me. The writing is Arabic and contains verses 2 and 3 from the final chapter surah of the Quran. The text is visible in the photo. The text visible in the photo reads in Arabic, sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind. All right. And we'll go to the next email. And I'll just pause it so you can read it. All of you can read it in its entirety. And he says, Dear Adel, the writing is clearly Arabic and is clearly from the Quran, the final surah, Surat al-Nas. It is certainly not Hebrew. And then he says, do you know where the slaves originally came from? So that was the email. And so he emphatically says it is Arabic. It is not Hebrew. All right. So next email is from Samar Ali and another scholar of Arabic. And he says, the Adel, thanks for reaching out. This is super interesting. It looks like Arabic in the West African script and could very well be a 3-word snippet of chapter 114 of the Quran, which nearly every Muslim would know and use for ritual prayer. I can't be certain without more context, but it looks like Al-Nas ila il-Nas, humanity, the God of humanity, from the middle of that chapter. Besides the prayer, it is used in stressful or frightening situations to summon God's protection. Let me know if I can be of any further help. So that was his. So he held to a more tentative approach than Khan, but nevertheless, it seems to be the case that he thinks that it could potentially read this way. So now we're going to look at Mahan Mirza, another scholar of Arabic, and it says, Dear Abdel, this is very interesting. It's hard for me to tell, and I'm not an expert in this area. If you could explain just very briefly, he's not an expert in this area, meaning?
Well, I guess Arabic written by slaves in the Americas or in West Africa or something like that. But yeah,
got you. Both photos seem to have a sin, i.e. the Arabic letter sin at the end. The one that is multicolored has something resembling Allah before it in red. If I were to venture a guess, the last phrase in that photo might say Ila al-Nas, which means the Lord of humanity. A verse in the last surah of the Quran, which is a prayer for protection from evil whisperings. And then he says, I suggest you float this to, and he gives, various things so you can see it for yourself. So we're going to move on. Oops, skipped ahead. Oops, no, I didn't skip it. So the next is from Suhey Webb, also William Webb. Abdel, this is remarkable. I will have a look, but I also encourage you to track down academics who have done research on this subject. I am aware that Professor Akbar Ahmed has some extensive work on this subject, and he links to a video, which those of you who watch this.
Yeah, and Akbar Ahmed is actually a scholar, a Muslim scholar who did some work on specifically Sapelo Island in Georgia.
Right. And so the video is there if anybody is interested in looking at the video. He says, is it difficult to make out? Do you have other images or better images than these? So, again, sharing his hesitant observations, but nevertheless, he directed our friend Abu to a scholar. And here is Janer Dali, and it reads, hello. This is a scholar. He says, from Holy Cross University, he says, I cannot make anything out of it. From the right, the one double belly could be the name of God, Allah, but it is really hard to tell. With your permission, I could post it to my networks online and see if anyone can help. So
really quickly, the reason why that's underlined is because when I first received this email, I interpreted it as him saying, I don't see Arabic, right? It's an email in favor of saying not Arabic. But seeing how others have tried to wrench things out of someone saying, "Oh, I see a remote possibility, a remote resemblance," like the mysterious Shaul, and Bunis and stuff like that. If someone is going to lean heavily into these sort of very tentative remote suggestions or suggestions of remote possibilities, then Janath Dali saying that he sees something resembling Allah would be relevant in that context. I don't think we should be appealing to these sort of tentative allusions to remote possibilities, but since some are doing that with Hebrew, it's worth noting that here's a scholar who did it with Arabic.
Yeah,
if we're consistent.
And we can even say that there are various scholars who have proposed resemblance to characters. So if one wanted to play this game, we could say we have multiple scholars who are supposedly endorsing Arabic by that standard, if one is going to take that as a standard, right? Oh, the resemblance of characters, even if they say it's not that language, therefore necessitates that it is that language. Well, by that standard, then we have a bunch of scholars who have been doing this for Arabic. So if we could, moving on to the name, I always mispronounce the name, Abu, if you could pronounce the name.
It's Mohsen Gudarzi. This is someone who's very skeptical. This is a scholar who's very skeptical about Arabic being there.
Yeah, so he's taking a very reluctant, very skeptical approach. And he's not the only one who is taking this. As you can see throughout the stream, we've had people saying emphatically, for example, for both languages, it's not this, right? Saracen said it's not Hebrew. He also doesn't think it's Arabic. You've had other scholars like Khan saying it's not Hebrew. It's clearly Arabic. By saying it's not Hebrew. Then you have this guy who's going to say he doesn't believe it's Arabic, right? Thanks for your email. I have looked at the images carefully, and I don't believe they contain Arabic writing. Now, it is not impossible for the writings to represent a highly cursive, idiosyncratic or local form of Arabic script. Someone with expertise in West African Islam could be a better judge of this. Nor is it impossible to read into them certain recognizable phrases from the Quran. I can read into them 2 phrases, in fact. But these would constitute imposition of a text upon the markings, which can be done basically with any set of sufficiently complex traces. By contrast, the image referenced in the second footnote clearly contains Surah 112 from the Quran and is immediately recognizable to those familiar with Arabic script. All right, so obviously he is sharing his reluctant views. Let me do this again. All right, and so this is another secret scholar named Ian, and he says it's not Arabic if that's what you're asking.
Kelly shared this, but it's a fragment. We don't know what was sent to him. We don't know what the full email says.
Right. It vaguely resembles Arabic. So there goes another scholar who thinks it resembles Arabic, but it's clearly not, right? In the by the same token, though, you've had scholars saying it's not Hebrew, although but then if we're going to say that the resemblance to something looking like Hebrew makes it Hebrew, then by the same standard, then the resemblance of Arabic somehow makes it Arabic. And I don't think that that should be the standard if a person is going to take this approach. All right. And this is from Yusuf Salih, and this is from your video, which is going to be linked in the description. An overlooked irony in the Brown Salih interview. And the irony is the interview raised an objection about a non-standard form which had the last letter of a word connecting to an aleph that preceded it. Yet the same interview itself provided a historical example of precisely that phenomenon.
Yeah, if I could just devote 30 seconds to describing this. He was reviewing the proposal that Ilahi Nas appears on a pew, and he objected that the proposal would entail the scene in An-Nas touching the Aleph before it, when in properly written Arabic, that's not supposed to happen. The ironic thing was earlier in the interview, they looked at an actual Arabic inscription in Morocco in which the word Al-Bab, which means the gate, appeared, and the same issue appeared. The last letter touched the Aleph before it. So there was a bit of irony that,
bit of irony. Yeah. And the video will be in the description for any who are interested and would like to explore that subject a little bit more. But it is worth noting that while this scholar doesn't believe that the pew that was examined has Arabic on it, it's nevertheless the case that you do have other scholars like Jeffrey Kahn who do believe there's Arabic, and others like Boubacar Diakite who looked at a pew.
Well, interestingly about this scholar, Yusuf Salhi, he himself said that it looks like Arabic letters. He said ultimately he doesn't think it's Arabic, but it looks like Arabic letters. And that takes us back to this question of consistent standards and even scales. Because if they're going to cite the mysterious Shaul, who says that it's not Hebrew, but there is a resemblance to Hebrew characters, if that somehow causes Hebrew to win by default, then even their own preferred Arabic professor saying he doesn't think it's Arabic, but there's resemblance to Arabic characters, by the same standard, Arabic should make the cut. But oh well.
Right. So this is the fourth section, inconsistent standards. So with that being said, inconsistent standards. We Woke Now and Associates propose that if a scholar says they don't think Arabic appears, then Arabic is disqualified, right? Yet We Woke Now and Associates propose that a scholar saying that they don't think Hebrew appears does not disqualify Hebrew. We Woke Now and Associates propose that an Arabic reading must reflect an educated familiarity with Arabic, free of writing mistakes. Yet, We Woke Now and Associates propose that a Hebrew reading is not required to reflect an educated familiarity with Hebrew. Rather, writing errors are treated as understandable because slaves were under duress, this is the inconsistent standard. So slaves are under duress when they're writing Arabic, if they write it, in a way that's
if I could really quickly. So in their interview with Yusuf Salhi, they held Arabic to a really high standard. And basically the argument was that if this was Arabic, it would contain a number of mistakes, like, for example, the scene touching the Aleph and all that. And that's the case against Arabic. Yet somehow when they switched to Hebrew, all of a sudden these like incredible spelling mistakes and stuff like that, and other kinds of orthographical mistakes, they're all overlooked because, you have to understand that they were slaves, they're under duress, and Kelly literally said all the rules are off the table. So they use completely different standards where they hold Arabic to a very high standard and Hebrew to a very low standard.
So the old adage, a rule for me, but not for you, seems to apply in this case.
Or a rule for thee, not for me.
Yeah. So special pleading at work here. If we could continue reading this, it says, We Woke Now and Associates propose that
there's one above it. There's one above it. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah. We Woke Now and Associates propose that if scholars see a resemblance to mere Hebrew characters or Ge'ez characters, that is sufficient for concluding those languages are on the pews. Yet, We Woke Now and Associates propose that scholars seeing resemblances to Arabic characters is not sufficient for concluding Arabic is on the pews. Conclusion. We Woke Now and Associates using uneven scales shows that even they tacitly recognize that the case for Arabic tacitly recognize that the case for Arabic is stronger. And then, the case for, were the case for Arabic weaker, there would be no need to try to quote unquote stack the deck against Arabic with inconsistent rules.
Yeah, so basically they hold Arabic to a different standard, to a higher standard than all the other languages that they like, and that shows that they're tacitly admitting that the case for Arabic is stronger, because otherwise why would they need to hold it to a different standard?
Right. And so when we talk about, an example, John Ardali's email,
I think you need to, is there more at the top or is that the beginning?
No, that's
the whole image. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, John Ardali's email basically said he did not see Arabic, but there is a remote possibility that Allah appears on the pew. The mysterious Shaul email said that emphatically he did not see Hebrew, but that there is a remote possibility that English written in cursive Hebrew characters appears in the pew. Consistent standard. If the mysterious Shaul email can be cited in favor of Hebrew on a pew, then Dali's email could be cited in favor of Arabic on the pew, if we're going to be
Exactly.
consistent. But we know that the opposing viewpoint is never going to be consistent when it comes to this. And we reach the synopsis. On sufficient complexity, only Arabic has had multiple coherent phrases proposed. Phrases have been proposed for Hebrew, but they have been nigh incoherent. Not even a single word has been proposed for Ge'ez, Amharic, or Aramaic.
Or Ladino for that matter. Okay.
Or Ladino, yeah. On appeals to scholars, multiple scholars have proposed multiple Arabic phrases. 3 different scholars propose independently of each other the same Arabic phrase. And if you could tell those people who those scholars are, the 3 independent
So
scholars.
again, Mahan Mirza, Jafri Khan, and Samar Ali all landed on Ilahi Nas. And then separate from that, Bubakar Diakite proposed La
Right.
ilaha illallah.
And what's interesting of all these guys, and it still strikes me as the most impressive, that Jeffrey Khan, the Hebrew chair, the top
Yes.
Hebrew professor at Cambridge University, emphatically said it is not Hebrew. Like, you know, if we were to treat scholars as somehow infallible popes, that would have been an ex cathedra statement if we were to do that. But of course, we're
Yes.
not, and we're not doing that. What we are
And
saying
he's a
is,
scholar of Arabic. He's the only one of all these scholars
Yeah.
referenced. He's the only one who's a scholar of Arabic and Hebrew.
so it's important to note that a top professor at Cambridge was saying that. Now, imagine if they had a top professor saying this about, about Hebrew, they would have used this as the trump card of all trump cards, right? But we, despite the fact that we do have this, we haven't used this to try to shut down discussions or try to silence opponents. In fact, we invite people to have disagreements with the scholars if they can grapple with the what's being presented argument wise. I think that it's fair to allow people to share their viewpoints. Although I think that if we're going to be fair and if we're weighing this on a balance, thus far, Arabic has won out over virtually any language that's been proposed, not on the basis of scholars, but on what has been proposed, on historical context. It seems to tick the box. Now, to
Here's
be
where we get
fair,
to the historical context. But go ahead.
exactly. But before we do that, I just want people to know, my friend Abu here doesn't take a position on language actually being on the pews. Like he remains skeptical of language. It's not that he
Mhm.
doesn't believe it's impossible. He simply remains he finds the claims overall questionable. He is skeptical about them. But Abu, you can say this emphatically, that if language were on the pews, if there is
Mhm.
language on the pews, thus far Arabic has had the weightiest case of all the languages.
Yeah, and that's what the summary covers, that in every single way, in terms of complexity, Arabic wins out over the other languages. In terms of appeals to scholars, Arabic wins out over the other languages. In terms of historical context, which you're about to read now, Arabic wins out over the other languages. The case for Arabic is consistently stronger on all fronts.
Right. And significantly stronger than Hebrew in any capacity.
Mhm.
On historical context, the Arabic phrases that have been proposed are among the most well-attested phrases in the history of writing, and had even been found in the writings of slaves in the southern United States. The string of Hebrew characters that have been proposed are mostly ahistorical, not found in extant Hebrew writings, much less the writings of slaves in the United States. This is particularly true of the ahistorical string of characters Kelly Richardson has proposed.
Mhm.
And so, since this is essentially right here, the end of our
Oh,
stream,
was there
I
not
did.
one more? There was one. I think there was one more. You don't have
No,
anything else?
that was it. Yeah,
Okay.
that was it. But before we end, I just want to use this as a moment to kind of just give our parting thoughts. As far as the claims for Hebrew, if we're going to treat this as Benaiah says with the historical context in mind, we don't have any slaves writing in Hebrew. We don't have any example of the ahistorical spellings, as you pointed out. And thus far, we have no scholar who has formally endorsed any Hebrew officially being on the pews. On the other hand, as you just mentioned moments ago, we do have all of those for Arabic, insofar as we have slaves writing in Arabic. We have slaves in Georgia writing in Arabic, in the southern United States writing in Arabic. And we have the relevant phrases that are being proposed being found
Exactly.
in their writings. That's the most
It's
salient, right?
incredible. Yeah, exactly. The very phrases that have been proposed for the pews are also found elsewhere in the writings of slaves in the Americas, including the southern United States. It's incredible.
Right. Now, to be fair, because I want to use this as an opportunity to give you an opportunity to say, why you feel skeptical, because I think that it's fair that people understand perhaps where your skepticism is coming from, and also, because I've mentioned this to you in the past, what would convince you? Because I know, believe it or not, you inadvertently, and I want the audience to
Mhm.
know this, that Abu, and he knows this because I've talked to him about this, he inadvertently convinced me of Arabic based on his thought experiment, although he wasn't seeking to try to convince
And the
anybody,
references to scholars, yeah,
and the
apparently.
references and the various other things that were proposed. But with all of that, some might say, well, Abu, why aren't you convinced? Could you share briefly with the audience why you remain skeptical?
So I'm in the same boat as Suhaib Webb and Mohsen Gudarzi. And Mohsen Gudarzi talked about the ability of the mind or the imagination to impose a text on the markings, right, which can be done with sufficiently complex markings. And so I think that there's still a very good chance that that's what's happening here. The imagination is making these connections precisely because the markings are so inconsistent, right? And the other thing is the strongest reading is this Annas ilahinas. And I think that one of the knocks against it is that it sort of picks up in the middle of the sentence. So as regarding what would convince me is if we could look at other pews and see the rest of that text on the other pews. So for example, those three words, annas ilahinas, which is a string of words that appears in the Quran and also appears in that letter we saw from South Carolina. The larger text has phrases like kul a'udhu birabbin nas, maliki nas, etc. Right? And so if we found the rest of that text on adjacent pews, that would convince me. But short of that, I do wonder if there isn't something analogous to pareidolia, to the mind's ability to make connections that might not actually be there.
Right. Although I will say this, and this goes for any language that's been proposed, not just one or two, just all languages thus far have left you skeptical. But again, just so we're on record about this, in spite of your skepticism, if you were to pick a language, Arabic, bar none,
Far and away.
has
Far and away it wins.
like radically far and away has
Yeah.
won out. And
Yes.
so and it has all the boxes that the opposing viewpoint have said must be ticked if one is going to propose language. Ironically enough, for their own claim for Hebrew, the boxes have been left unticked in virtually everything, with the exception of maybe tentative suggestions for words or phrases on the
Mhm.
on the resemblance of mere letters that might give rise to some sort of phrase if one were to wrestle it out
Yeah.
of the, but thus far, no scholar has said it is this phrase, it is from here, it is, we have an attestation of this being found with slaves in the America. None of that has
Right.
been demonstrated for Hebrew or for Ge'ez or for Amharic or for
Mhm.
anything else that has been proposed. But ironically enough, the one language that seems to have the foremost weight to it, historical context. There were a significant amount of slaves that came to the America that were Muslim, so it would make sense why they would know Arabic, why they would have these sort of Quranic phrases in their thoughts. And even if they became Christians, it wouldn't be out of the realm of orthodoxy to use that expression in a sort of amalgamated way to, and I'm not saying that people should do this, I'm just saying it wouldn't be out of the realm of thought to think that the slaves could very well have amalgamated these phrases into their Christian walks, insofar, or even the former slaves or people who grew
Mhm.
up in households where perhaps they maybe had parents that had this belief system still intact in a crypto sense, like crypto Muslims, that perhaps when they embraced Christianity, these phrases were still, they could still be transferred over to just a generic expression regarding the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? In the same way that Paul uses in Acts 17:28, the writings of Aratus of Soli and Epimenides of Crete to take away what the Greeks had been giving to their gods to give it to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So too, it could be the case that some of the slaves may have had the same thought process in mind, maybe inspired by Paul himself. They could have, and I'm just saying this is all hypothetical. None of this is definitive. It's just you know, if we're going to propose hypotheticals for language, it's very much possible that these slaves may have not had any connection to Islam in and of itself. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Who knows? Like, there's so many variables. Maybe they were crypto Muslims practicing their belief system in this place. And none of that should lead people to reject the hypothesis. It shouldn't be the case that, well, because, you know, I think of Islam as this bad thing, which, you know, as Christians, I think all of us who are Christians in the Orthodox sense would have pushback against Islam. And of course, with reason. It's nevertheless the case, though, that it wouldn't, we shouldn't think
theological disagreements with Muslims should not prevent us from fairly assessing whether someone in the Americas wrote in Arabic, whether it's on the Pews or in Bilali diary,
or even if even if they were crypto Muslims. If it turns out to be the case that they were crypto Muslims, this isn't an indictment against the Christian faith. It's just a reality of something that happens. You know, it's like like you have examples of Jews that were crypto Jews that continue to practice their belief system while living in Christian countries. So it shouldn't be the case that if we can see Jews and other groups of people doing this elsewhere, that somehow it's impossible for it to happen in the antebellum South, in the Americas. Why? What would be the basis? Because you don't want Arabic to be there, because and I'm gonna wrap it up with this. Because some of you don't want Arabic to be there because you think the implications cast aspersions on your identity claim.
I really do think that's what's guiding it. I think some people have this aversion to Islam, and therefore that sort of colors their willingness to acknowledge Arabic on the pews, or at least apply consistent standards to Arabic vis-a-vis the other language claims, precisely because they don't want to have the markings be associated with anything even remotely adjacent to anything Islamic. And so
or even this. Here's the problem. They think that if the slaves wrote in Arabic and all of this is occurring, then, you know, it's like this kind of like almost ignorant American approach where it's like, Arabic therefore equals Ishmael. You're a descendant of Ishmael. Learn having a belief system. Here's the thing. You have Jews.
Language is totally separate from lineage.
You have Jews, Spanish Jews, Sephardic Jews. You know, the guys that a lot of these guys like Benaiah and Kelly claim are really their
writing
kin.
in Arabic.
Maimonides
wrote in Arabic. Maimonides wrote in Arabic. Most famous Sephardic Jew in history wrote in Arabic.
So this has, if a person were to take the identity claim, in spite of our disagreements with a person in that regard, it's irrelevant if we're talking about you know, the idea of you know, language and what was, you know, what's on the pews. You know, taking the identity part out of it, just historical context, possibility as far as what's on there. It's very much the case that Arabic points much clearer in the direction of what could be on the pews. Then
and can we mention the website, by the way, with that in mind? So what we've shown here in this discussion is that the case on multiple fronts, the case for Arabic is much stronger than the case for Hebrew, and especially the case for Ge'ez or Amharic or Aramaic. And here's the thing, the website of First African Baptist Church, there have been people jockeying back and forth regarding what appears on the website. And initially the website was claiming Hebrew, you know, at least as far back as 2018, maybe earlier. Then the website was changed to say Arabic, and then it was changed again to remove Arabic, but say Hebrew, Ge'ez, Amharic, and Aramaic. And the thing is, there's no way you can have a consistent standard and arrive in favor of Amharic and Ge'ez and Aramaic and Hebrew, yet not arrive in favor of Arabic. There's no way you can have reach that conclusion using consistent standards. If you're using even scales, there's no grounds on which to think that Hebrew or Aramaic or
in fact that the
Arabic, it's impossible. And that's the real issue here, uneven scales. And, you know, and we're taking an honest look at this and showing where the actual strength is vis-a-vis these languages.
Yes. And in fact, the irony there is that the website made a claim for ancient from the 1800s. What was it?
Ancient Aramaic from the 1800s, which of course,
Aramaic. Ancient Aramaic from the 1800s. Like, you know, come on, man. Like, if we're gonna be fair, let's be fair, right? Everything that I would imagine the proponents of the opposing viewpoint have said is necessary is there for Arabic. The hesitancy is, and I do think it's not just the idea of like Islamophobia, it's also the idea of flat out, you know, this is undermining our identity claim. because I'll just be honest. Like, I've seen some of these guys in other subjects and other areas be willing to say that there are quote unquote Israelites who practice Islam, right? Or even now are practicing Islam.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
I don't think it has anything to do in and of itself with Islam and the aversion to the belief system. I do sincerely think it has to do with the idea that if the slaves spoke this language, therefore it's this crude. I honestly think, at least with Kelly, and I'll just say it publicly, I think it's to the point where he thinks that if the slaves spoke Arabic, therefore they're descendants of Ishmael. Like, and if he doesn't think that, then why are you adverse to Arabic? But you know why he's adverse to Arabic? Let's just be honest. The case for Hebrew has been extremely weak, and the case for Arabic has been extremely strong. And in his mind, he needs that connection to Hebrew for his presupposition, which is the identity claim. But again, if you were sharp enough, and no disrespect, I'm not trying to disrespect, but if you were sharp enough to really glean this, you could say you had Sephardic Jews that wrote in Arabic. And if you want to make that connection, you could actually make a better connection using that than to cast aspersions on the idea that it's possible to have Arabic even anywhere near there when you have Sapelo Island, which is in Georgia, and you have slaves writing in Arabic there. Like, it's insane to me to think that, and then, and we'll talk about it in the live stream that we're going to do, because we're going to wrap it up here. We're going to do a live stream on the controversies. And some of what we're saying at the end, I want people to see, this is a subject that needs to be discussed. The controversies and what is,
the shenanigans.
The shenanigans. Yeah. And we can talk what we've been dealing with for the past few years. And in fact, my friend Abu has tried to be as charitable as possible in these discussions, in spite of our disagreements. And the opposing viewpoint, which has not been as charitable, has then feigned outrage over mere criticism, to the point where you're attacking my family has become a thing, from their side. That's a claim that they make, that supposedly Abu and others and myself have somehow attacked their families because we're having disagreements on a subject which should be examined academically. But there seems to be an emotional attachment, and I think that's unfortunate. So we'll have a live stream discussing that. Any final thoughts, my friend?
No, I think this pretty much this pretty much summed it up, and I'm looking forward to the next discussion. Of course, if anyone wants to discuss this further, we can discuss this in the comment section and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that note, we hope you enjoyed this. This was basically a overview and a synopsis of all of what's been discussed in these conversations. So if anybody is interested in the subject, this would be the video to check out. We'll have timestamps of the sections and things that were covered. We'll have the links in the description for those who are interested in the subject. And so on that note, we're going to end it here. I appreciate all of you for showing up. I appreciate Theophilus in the chat. I appreciate those who will watch this in the future. And I appreciate my friend Abu for showing up and contributing a large portion to what's been discussed here. So on that note, we're going to end it here. God bless you all. I hope this has edified someone out there. And until next time, take care. God bless you.
God bless.